Um, I'm so pleased also to see that Mr. Asamoah, who's the Vice President of the African Development Bank, is here with us. Before I invite him to speak, you'll see my bias. I'd like to invite my very good friend, who is the Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa. He's an accomplished diplomat, highly respected in the international community. He was director of the UN Staff College. He advised Secretary General Kofi Annan for a number of years in the startup of his term. He was also the executive director for the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. He has served in the field. He was the resident coordinator in one of the largest, in fact, the largest operations globally, which is in Brazil, where I had the privilege and honor to participate in an exciting conference, the first time ever when the idea of public-private partnerships was discussed, way back about 12, 15 years ago, actually. Carlos, I'm so pleased you're here, and I know you participated in the NEPAD meeting this morning, and you hosted the FFD event in July, and we'll be back with you for the AU Summit in January. So we want to invite you to share your thoughts about the African leadership story. Welcome.
Thank you, Amir, and with my apologies to Salomon. Because of the complicated agenda today, I will have to leave, so this is very nice of you to accommodate me to make just a few comments. And I'm very happy that I'm doing it in a panel with Mayaki and Gatete, two brothers and two people with whom I work very closely, together with Salomon. Well, by now, I think this kind of public knows the Africa story from one perspective, which is about growth, opportunities. The problem with that story is that it's a very partial story. It's a story that camouflages three problems that we are also more or less familiar, but we have a bit more difficulty in putting in graphic terms to those who are not very knowledgeable about the continent. The issue of agricultural productivity being so low, the fact that manufacturing value addition is going down instead of up in the middle of this growth story, and the fact that our services boom is characterized immensely by an informal sector that is exploding and therefore not generating what the ILO defines as decent jobs. So it's about unemployment and to a large extent activities that are more linked to resilience, but not necessarily to economic transformation. So our agenda is about economic transformation. And economic transformation is more than just changing the GDP composition, which is part of it. It's also taking advantage of a number of opportunities from our perspective, very different from just the opportunities for the investors. And I think it's important to start from that vantage point to then make the case for investment, which I will. We all know the fact that Africa does not benefit much from value addition of its natural resources. We have a very lively extractive sector that has been more or less associated with the richness of the continent. It generates just about 1% of Africa's employment, formal employment, so it's nothing, despite the fact that it contributes close to 80% of our exports, although it's not really the number one responsible part of our growth story, which is mostly characterized by internal demand. But still, most of the investments until quite recently were going into this, extractive industries. And now we are seeing a shift, and this shift is very much welcome because it is part of this transformation that I was talking about. And that shift is actually increasing the rate of return of investment in Africa, which is now the highest, 9.4% compared to the average of 7.2. And therefore, you know, in principle, with such a nice line, we shouldn't need to sell Africa too much. People should be coming to us because there is so much excess of capital right now in the market. So this is a unique opportunity to make bucks. But of course, as you know, there is the association with risk that really Africans have a great deal of difficulty getting rid of because of the narrative being what it is. And I don't have time to go into the details of the narrative, but basically if you look into the future and the opportunities that the future offers, you look into the megatrends, the demographic megatrend, the technological megatrend, and of course the environmental megatrend, Africa is very much poised to be a solution for a number of problems that we are seeing today. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it, because in terms of natural resources, not just the extractives will still count, but that's not the main opportunity in Africa. It's more the fact that we have arable land that is going to be scarce, is the fact that we are going to be able to take advantage of renewable energy now having a cost of production similar to fossil fuels, which means that we can go straight into leapfrogging into green industrialization. And the fact that we have such low productivity in agriculture is actually an opportunity, because it shows that with very marginal residual sometimes efforts, you can really catapult Africa into a very different league. And all of this depends on infrastructure. So the investments on infrastructure are key. And I think the African Development Bank has put its finger into it. Of course, we had the continental agenda for it defined by NEPAD through PIDA, the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And once we fix that one big problem, we still have 3 other very big problems to fix. Second one is the issue of how we are going to increase capital access. Domestic resource mobilization is the door. We have to mobilize much more internal African resources. I don't have time to elaborate, but this morning I did it in another panel. Huge opportunities there. I calculate with my colleagues that we have about $1 trillion of opportunities in the continent that can be tapped into. We just need the right mechanisms. And of course, we have to discuss that rather than discuss aid. Aid, as much as I like it, it's $52 billion. It's not much compared to the needs of the continent, and not much compared to the 1 trillion that we need to mobilize. And that is where we should put our emphasis. And we have also another very important difficulty, which is the difficulty of how we are going to prepare our youth to take advantage of these opportunities. And of course, this includes human capital investments that are extremely important. And I think we are going to just take the demographic dividend rhetoric to one step higher and make sure that this political determination that has been mentioned several times finds its way also in the way we deal with education and equipping our youth to respond to the calls for industrialization. And that, of course, is going to allow us to finally do what other regions have already done. You know, if you look into the history of industrial development in the world, it's very simple. Colonies do not industrialize, okay? Colonies do not industrialize. They take time to industrialize because this was a preserve that you have to conquer. You have to go through the stairs. And as you become independent, you can make it if you are capable of actually putting in place the right setups. Africans have been the latest to be decolonized, and even further have been the latest to actually walk those stairs. And as a result, they are real latecomers when it comes to industrialization. So much so that some people have even doubts that we can do it still today. Well, if you look into the labor costs in Asia, particularly in China, that's an opportunity for Africa, because the low-end value industrial production of those regions will have to migrate, and we offer a very good bet for that migration. If you look into the potential that we have for green industrialization, I mentioned it, that's another opportunity. If you look into the African market that is growing not just in terms of middle class, but overall demographics, is going to be about 2 billion people before 2050, and we are going to be the largest workforce by 2040. there you go. You know, these are very powerful incentives if Africans do the right things. And doing the right things is basically about setting the agenda right and convincing investors like you that really it's not just about return on investment being so good. It is the best. It's also about us being able of convincing you through our narrative that the risk is worth taking. Thank you.
Carlos, thank you. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.